It's interesting when I hear churches talk about this in January. I feel like a lot of times when they get into the financial side, but they're talking about the extremes. And I think a lot of people in the congregation just kind of lean back and go, this one's not for me, because they're talking about the person that racked up insane credit card debt over the toys they bought for their kids. Everybody has room to make progress in this area, but our preaching at the New Year's resolution, kind of in that season, is more extreme. There's also another thing about assumptions. I have found that when these sermon series are being crafted, especially when they're topical, we're assuming everybody in the congregation has a new health goal, a new finance goal, a new relationship goal. And some may have either a very simple goal or something very specific that they're believing God for. And many are actually going away from that. So we're sitting here saying, oh, we're being relevant. We're really resonating with people. And we're assuming that people are working on all these areas in their lives. So removing those assumptions and going, hey guys, it's the beginning of New Year. We know some of you make New Year's resolutions, some of you don't. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's a great time for us to recalibrate and look at our journey with God.
Hello, friends. Frank Beeler, Jim Shepard here with the Next Sunday podcast.
We made it.
To Christmas.
To Christmas.
Well, technically, we didn't. It's the day before Christmas. There's still time, Frank. This could tank quickly.
Yeah. I have a good friend in ministry that literally does all his Christmas shopping on Christmas Eve morning before Christmas Eve church services. And that sounds terrible and stressful. He doesn't do any online shopping. He goes shopping on Christmas Eve to get whatever gifts for his wife or his kids. I kid you not. And then he goes to church on Christmas Eve and preaches a message.
Frank, the object of a podcast is to keep people talking. And I have no words for that. Yeah. I have nothing for that.
He's done it for as long as I've known him.
Oh, my
And I'll tell you who it is later, and you'll laugh.
Oh, my
It's quite the thing. Yeah.
I can't.
There you go.
I can't even fathom that. I mean, I'm willing to put some stuff off on the shopping, but that's a coming in hot type look right there.
For sure. He loves it, too.
What if you can't? Well, let's not even.
I got all kinds of questions.
It's like lots of questions. But we've got a podcast episode to do today. And we've got some cool stuff that we're going to talk about today, too, right?
It's going to be a good
episode. It's the end of the year, but then right after that comes what?
New Year's.
And the first of the year.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Which is a good time for what?
Yeah, New Year resolutions for a lot of people, fresh start, whether you're into New Year resolutions or not. Some churches are into it and really lean into it. Some kind of avoid that and like, hey, let's just get things right today while wait until New Year's or whatever it may be. But we know that a lot of people make big decisions going into the new year. They want to start new financial habits, new health habits.
Yeah.
They want it. It's an opportunity to see a fresh start and change. And so what we thought we'd talk about today is how does the church lean in on this opportunity, specifically in the area of finances? Yeah. That's your area of expertise and wisdom.
Apparently.
To go, how do we appropriately lean into? If you have one, that would be
that would be it. I like that. That's a better qualifier there.
If you have an area of expertise, I think it's in the area of finances. But you've seen churches get this right, probably miss it from time to time of how they lean in appropriately in this season. So I'd love to just get your thoughts on how does a church, when it comes to finance, stuff like that, when do they lean in or not lean in on these natural kind of strategic rhythms that are happening in the life of their congregation?
So I love the first of the year as an opportunity to do that. I think you've really just flagged this one as a perfect opportunity. What I see a lot, though, Frank, is what I call a presumptive mindset. We're going to presume something that may or may not be true of our people. Now, it may be true of a few of our people, but not a lot of our people. And the presumption that we make this time of year is that everyone comes out of Christmas with their finances all jacked up. Now, that could be true with some people, but it might not be true. And so what I find is churches are somewhat reluctant in January to have the conversation when I think you would be more proactive. I mean, you know me well enough to know I'm going to be counterintuitive about most everything. When you're thinking left, I'm going to be thinking right. And when you're thinking up, I'm thinking down. That doesn't mean I'm always right. It's just the way my brain works. And so when you're thinking it's the time to back off as a ministry leader, I'm thinking it's the time to lean in.
Yeah.
Right? But more from a transformational, from a discipleship standpoint. point. If your finances are messed up from the holidays, that's not the problem. The problem is that you don't have priorities and a budget and a plan. And because you didn't have that, you got off track. Well, you didn't get off track. You just went crazy during December.
Yeah.
And now maybe your credit card is jacked up or your savings is down or however you do that. And that could be true for some people. I don't think it's true for most people that are in the churches that we're talking to in these constituencies. So I'd be careful about a presumptive mindset. What I would do is try to take an approach that I thought would address pretty much everybody. And that would be, have you thought about your money as one of the ways that God wants to sanctify and change your life? Not have you thought about giving more money to my church. Have you thought about how God might want to use money to sanctify and change your life? Because most people haven't thought about it in those terms, Frank. You know that. That's why it's a lot of why we're here and a lot of why we do what we do inside of Generis is to try to move people off of this transactional mindset. This is your relationship with money and possessions is not a transaction, a financial transaction with a church on Sunday morning. It's a spiritual relationship with a holy God who wants to purify and sanctify your life.
Yes.
That's what it is. And that's where we've missed the point. So back to the question at hand. The first of the year is a great time to address that, a great time to address that. I mean, for me, this year was a very transformational year for me in terms of a New Year's resolution because I have been reading devotionals. I feel like I've been faithful in my time with God, but starting late last year, God put a word on me. And this is not to say that devotionals are bad for other people. God put a word on me to lay aside devotionals and spend time only in the Word of God.
Yeah.
And I have a brand new study Bible that's never been written in. Everything that's in that study Bible was written this year.
Love it.
And I went to 5-day devotional plan. It's a 5-day-a-week plan that I got out of Gospel Coalition, and I started a new habit, and it feels like a natural rhythm to me, Frank. At this point in the year, what are we like, 280 or 90 days into the year, something like that? Maybe 300 days, I guess, by now.
I would say so.
Yeah, something
just
like,
over 300.
Well, if it's Christmas
we're here,
Eve, we're getting so way into the year. Let's go back. Graduated from the University of Georgia. Never was very good at math. That's what's coming back to haunt us here at this time. But it's just for me. So it is a time that you can really get a new habit. It takes about 21 days. I can tell you that into January, when I first started, it was zeal and passion that was motivating me. But after I got into it, right now, it's a daily thing. And, I've read my Bible in years past, but, it just felt like God was really just leaning in on me. And so that's what I would say to people about, financial disciplines. Make it something that if it's budget that's a problem, deal with that. If it's spiritual that it's a problem, deal with it. If it's both, deal with both of those. Yeah. And January could be a good time for that.
It's interesting when I hear churches talk about this in January. It's part of a New Year's resolution bundle series of some kind. And then there's the health one, the relationship/marriage one, there's the giving one. For those that preach topically, that's pretty common that happens. It's interesting because you touched in on something. I feel like a lot of times when they get into the financial side, they are talking about budgeting, but they're talking about the extremes. And I think a lot of people in the congregation just kind of lean back and go, this one's not for me, because they're talking about the person that racked up insane credit card debt over the toys they bought for their kids. Right. Did everybody overspend? Possibly a little bit on Christmas, more than they wanted to. But to your point, I wonder if sometimes we undermine ourselves in our messaging when we're trying to resonate with people in a season by looking for the extreme examples when everybody, if we believe this is a discipleship journey, if we think this is transformative, everybody has room to make progress in this area. But our preaching at the New Year's resolution, kind of in that season, is more extreme. There are some of you that are way over here, and most of the message is trying to help those people get right with God, when oftentimes everybody has a journey to take and everybody can make some improvements. There's also another thing about assumptions. I have found that when these sermon series are being crafted, especially when they're topical, we're assuming everybody in the congregation has a new health goal, a new finance goal, a new relationship goal. And some may have either a very simple goal or something very specific that they're believing God for. And many are actually going away from that. So we're sitting here saying, oh, we're being relevant. We're really resonating with people. And we're assuming that people are working on all these areas in their lives. And so we start at that place.
Yeah.
So removing those assumptions and going, hey, guys, it's the beginning of a new year. We know some of you make New Year's resolutions, some of you don't. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's a great time for us to recalibrate and look at our journey with God. And that shows up in many different ways. Yeah. And then just kind of speak to the people there. And I think there's room to talk finances at the beginning of the year to everybody in your congregation and not isolate those that have made some really poor decisions or put themselves in a bind.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, Frank. If you're going to offer a model that's workable and that can be substantiated with biblical wisdom, right? So, for example, if the issue was budgeting, then we should talk about money the way the Bible talks about money, which is give, save, spend, right? The way the world teaches it is exactly opposite of that. Spend, save, give, right? Which is a lot of people are overspending, so there's hardly anything left for saving, and that's why they're not able to give. Well, if you flip that over and you make giving your first priority, well, now you got a chance to win. Yeah. Right? Because if you let your giving regulate the other things, you got a better chance to make it work. The cool thing is, not all practical wisdom is biblical, but biblical wisdom is practical. Yeah. And so if you could just take that, for example, I mean, for me, you were talking about it a minute ago, and I was thinking to myself, money's not really the problem for me during Christmas. You know what the problem for me is?
What's that?
From about the 22nd of December till the 2nd of January, I just eat out of a trash can, basically. If I ate out of a trash can, it would probably be better. I mean, I eat pretty good. You watch me. I'm not crazy about that. But it's not overspending money. I overspend calories. Yeah. And it just, I mean, if I were to keep a food diary from like the 22nd to January 2nd, you'd look and say, oh my gosh, how did you get out of bed? Right?
So, Jim, what are you going to do about that? So what I hear you saying is that you are going to log everything you already eat this year from December 22nd to January 2nd, and we're going to post it on the next Sunday podcast feed. So it has a real level of accountability here.
Ooh, look for that on your social media post. Look for that on your social media post when we're posting this episode, because it might show up out there.
Well, tell me this. If we're talking about giving in the new year and we're trying to find out a way to resonate with people, how do churches avoid not just taking a bunch of people in their congregation through a shame and guilt journey of just kind of heaping on, hey, you've made these really poor decisions, you've done this, you've put yourself in this bind. How do you think church leaders can address some of these tensions? Because some people do overspend at Christmas, or they feel like they don't have enough, or they really want something for their kid and they really can't afford it, but they'll overextend to do that. That happens. That's real. So how does the pastor or leadership address those things without just heaping on shame and guilt? Because we've all got problems and things we're navigating.
Yeah. And I love that question, Frank, because what I do see, and you see it as well, what I do see a lot is inadvertent, because I don't think pastors do this on purpose, inadvertent shame and guilt that comes out of things you say about how people are dealing with their money, right? For me, I would go back to, really this whole Philippians 4:17 mindset. It's not the gift that you gave me, Paul said, but it's what happened between you and God when you made that gift, right? And help people to understand that your giving is one of the ways that you come before God, you sanctify yourself, and your spending and other things, if they aren't properly regulated, can get in the way of that. So if you've come through a bad season, let's forgive that. Let's blot that one off. Yeah. But how about if we do this? Let's say, let's not have a do-over on that. Let's not run that back again. That wasn't a good one. Let's not have a do-over. So how would we not have a do-over and maybe address that from the more redemptive standpoint rather than just, hey, that wasn't very good, right? I mean, most of us, I think, when we're not spending money well or not spending calories well, I think we know it.
We know.
We know. I mean, when you sit down at Christmas dinner and you look at that plate full and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, how much? Well, the same thing is true with money, right? Is you've got to find a way to redeem the bad decision. Hey, all of us make them. What does it look like not to do that again, right? What does it look like not to do that?
How do churches effectively resource and not just preach about this to say, do better? There's a scriptural aspect to this to guide them spiritually, but practically, how do you see churches effectively say, hey, for some of you, you've got to get a budgeting plan. For some of you, you need to understand that it all comes from God and you need to kind of go on this other kind of discipleship journey. Some of you are reflecting on, you've been blessed with so much and you're trying to figure out what to do with it. And you're looking back and going Christmas and going, out of abundance, I don't know that I handled that well. I had excess, but looking back, I don't know if I did a good job with that. Like, how do we help them practically navigate those things as a church? What resources, what programs, what do we bring in to help serve them?
Well, and I think that's super important, because if we teach them spiritually and we bring conviction, but they don't have a way out of the mess they're in, that doesn't feel like we're doing right by them.
Yeah.
So I think we do have to do both. You've got to give spiritual conviction, something is wrong here, and then give a practical way, how do you address these issues? Probably my favorite one. It's not new. It's been said many times, but my favorite one that I've seen a lot of people find freedom with, friends of mine and people that are in churches all over the place, is Financial Peace University, Frank. I mean, Financial Peace University has been around. They've done a couple of revisions, but they've never changed the basic philosophy. The basic philosophy is we can help you get your finances right. Whether your problem is spending, whether your problem is saving, or whether your problem is giving. You're not giving enough. Or if it's some problem, symptom of all three of those, right? Because probably they're related. But they take and address that with a budget form, with practical steps, but with spiritual underpinnings that are all biblically based. And what I love about it is they're not teaching you to get your finances in order just so you can live better. They're teaching it so you can give, and not just give, but give to your local church, which you know I'm a big advocate of. Now, you can give beyond that, but let your church be primary, and then other things become after that. And I think Financial Peace University is the one. There are others out there. I know people would bring up some of the others, but it's the one that I find that is that practical tool of budgeting that sets free so many people. Now, the second one would be, I think there's a curriculum out there. It's a sermon series that he preached several years ago, but it's out there now as a small group series. I think it's in Right Now, if I'm not mistaken. If it's not in Right Now, you can find it on YouTube. And it's Andy Stanley's series. His series was called If Your Money Could Talk, and I believe the small group series is called Money Talks. And it's out of North Point. It's Andy's. I love that series because, you know, what he uses in the sermon series. If your money could talk, here's what it would say to you. And I want to tell you something. As somebody who's dealt with this topic over the years, I felt like I've, kind of paid attention to it in my life. It was very revealing to me when I let those questions wash over me. And it was very helpful for me to find some places where I had become complacent, and maybe a couple of places where I wasn't really honoring God the way that I should, with my finances. So those would be the two right off the top of my list. There's others, and you could say, if you're in your church and you have one that you like a lot and it's doing all the things that we talked about, go for it.
Great.
I'm not saying move over to these.
It is If Money Talked is the name of the series, the study series, and you go to ifmoneytalk.com. It's not currently on Right Now Media, but you can find it there. Great resource. One of the challenges for pastors and church leaders when they're talking about budgeting and talking about making wise choice with their finances, it's a little hard for them to talk about because they don't have their own house in order when it comes to this. So we've talked about this through the lens of like a capital campaign and a church staff getting on board with that. And there's a whole nother conversation around that. But one of the things that I've observed is that there are some leaders that just simply aren't comfortable to go there because they're still trying to figure it out themselves, and they can't go to their own financial peace university class and not lead it. They need to sit in there with their wife and work through stuff, but that gets wonky. What do you say to the leader that knows that this needs to be addressed and it's a challenge, but they're trying to figure it out themselves, either because of limited resources and they just kind of got themselves in a bind? Part of that could be just being in ministry. Sometimes it's hard financially to be in ministry. What do you say to that leader that's like, I'm kind of avoiding this topic because I don't have my house in order in this way?
So I'm going to give you an example, and then I'll speak to it. So I think, well, let me just make the point, and then I'll give you an example. I think you could lead your congregation by being in that class and acknowledging your own struggle.
Okay.
I think that would speak very loudly
That's
to
awesome.
your congregation.
Yeah, that's
I think
huge.
it would, right?
Yep.
To just, you don't have to divulge the details, but just be in the class, right?
Yep.
2011, when we did what's called Momentum, it's Churchwide Financial Peace University, and all of our church, in my church.
Okay.
We were trucking along. Our registrations were pretty good. And then and we were going to start the first of next year. And so I think it was the weekend after Thanksgiving, my pastor stood up and said, hey, by the way, we're going to start our Financial Peace University church-wide right after the first of the year. We have signed up. My wife and I have signed up. Frank, if I remember correctly, we had like 850 families signed up, and we went to like 1,900 overnight just because he said he was going to be in the class. So I think acknowledging your struggle, and he said to us later when he was through the class, he said, I went into this not knowing what my problem was. He said, my problem was saving. I don't have enough saved up to be able to retire. Wow. And so I've now started talking to the elders in the church about making sure that my financial plan is on track, right? I think one of the things that all of these programs sometimes get mislabeled as is it's for broke people.
Right.
It is for broke people. Sure. But if you're broke, you need some help. Yep. But it's for all of us. All of us have an area in our lives, whether it's spending or saving or giving, whatever it is, we've got an area in our life that has gotten off track, and this helps us to get back on track. So I think acknowledging your struggle would be part of it. And Frank, you couldn't have hit the nail on the head any better, because, I've been out here 32 years doing this, working with churches, spending time behind closed doors with pastors. I can't even begin to think how many pastors behind closed doors have said to me, hey, I feel reluctant because I'm not good at this. Yeah. And my answer is, well, you're probably not that great at prayer either. You're probably, let's go down a list of things that you're probably not good at, and you're preaching on all of those. So let's not let it get in the way of preaching on this one. Yeah. Right.
Jim, I love that. I love that perspective. What would you tell a pastor not to do at the beginning of the year? We're telling them what to do. We're giving them some advice on some practical resources and things like that. What would be something to kind of avoid in trying to lean in this new year as a opportunity to kind of reset some plans, specifically in the area of finances for the congregation? Where do they not need to go?
Well, I'm going to point toward the transformational mindset in the language. So I'm definitely going to say avoid anything that feeds the transactional mindset, which would be, we need more money. We're trying to get off to a strong start. If you're in the middle of your fiscal year, lots of churches have switched their fiscal year so that December falls in the middle, not at the end of the year. I'm a big fan of that. Not saying it's wrong to do it otherwise, but I'm a big fan of that if I was a financial guy. So you might use any of those things that just sound transactional. I would avoid all of that, right? I would start off the year strong. It would be all positive things. Hey, one of the things I would do is start off the year, I would talk about how many first-time givers we had last year. Yeah. Right? And say something on the order of, if you haven't started your giving journey here yet, January could be a great time for you to do that, for you to draw closer to God, let Him begin to have a place in your money and possessions and the way that you deal with that, and be like and name how many people you had last year that gave for the first time. You're celebrating those people. You're normalizing the fact that people give for the first time around here a lot. Depending on the size of your church, that number is going to be a lot. It's probably going to be somewhere between 15 and 25% of the number of people who actually give in a year are going to be first-time givers. And so that might be a really good tone to set off the start of the year, just like, hey, maybe this could be your month, this could be your year.
Yeah. One last kind of big question for you. Let's say the church just finished a campaign. in October, November, maybe all the way through December. So they've been talking a lot about finances, where the vision of the church is, where we're going. And now it's January. Do you go ahead and talk about it anyway because it's a felt need, or do you kind of avoid it because it feels like you've been talking about it for a couple months in one way or another? How do you navigate that unique complexity for those churches, oftentimes churches that we serve, that have a kind of fall, winter campaign and feel like they've talked and they've worked a lot on this?
Yeah.
How does that show up in the new year and not feel like, gosh, it feels like all we're doing is talking about our finances? How do we navigate that?
Yeah, I think if it were me, Frank, I wouldn't lean so heavy on the asking part of it. I would lean in on the casting vision side of it.
Okay.
Right, because that's what we do. A lot of what we do in these initiatives is we're talking about the to, which is the vision, and the from, which is the discipleship part. You know, Philippians 4:17. I sought not the gift because of my own need, but because of your need.
Yeah.
Right. And what I see is that churches, and by the way, campaigns feel like you're just like, whoo, oh, I'm so glad we're over that. Whoo. But don't just ignore it altogether and act like it never happened.
Right.
And that's what so many churches do.
Totally.
And I'm just like, wow, stop. I mean, so think about it this way. What if you just resurrected the vision conversation and kept that alive?
Yeah.
You don't have to put the ask into it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so excited about what we just finished in the fall of this year, what God is calling us to for the next 10 and 20 and 25 years, and that we're able to step. And what I want us to do this year is I want us to remember what God is calling us to.
Yeah.
Right? And so keep that vision alive and not so much worry about the ask at that point in time.
That's great. And of course, coming out of a campaign series of any kind, there's an opportunity to celebrate testimonies and stories. I mean, on our commitment card, our church just wrapped up a campaign last week, last Sunday, wonderful campaign. On there was, first box, it said, check all that apply. Start tithing, continue tithing, make a one-time gift for this year, you know, so because there was no pledge to it. And there are some people that have been at the church for a while that checked that start tithing box. That's the only box they checked. And we're so excited about taking them on that journey and having conversations with them, because they're coming out and saying, hey, I want to work on this. And they wrote their name and their phone number and their address, and to be able to say, hey, why did you choose to do this? Why now? You know, and find those opportunities for testimonies and celebrations, because many of those people made those commitments right before the holidays. So how did that play out? You know, it's a lot to figure out. So I think coming out of those seasons, there's these opportunities to share the goodness of God and what happens when generosity is unlocked in the heart of people, because what it happens in their relationship with God, right? And so we can, that very much, that casting that vision, we also can say, look at God go. It's an opportunity just to celebrate what God is doing in the heart of people, saying we long for that for you as well, period.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think it's an opportunity for us, Frank. You know how much I love these verses. 1 Chronicles 29, 10 through 17, King David talking after the great offering. And in around verse 14, he says, but who am I and who are we?
Yeah.
That we even get to do this.
Oh, that's so good.
The humility. Who am I?
Yeah.
I mean, King David's gift was billions of dollars, billions of dollars. Who am I and who are we that we even get to do this, right? And if we could reinforce that in the hearts of our people and understand that, then I think that would be a good way to start off the year.
That is fantastic. Jim, thank you for another great episode, sharing your wisdom.
Hey, pray for me in that trash can. I don't need to be eating out of the trash can
we'll be
this
watching
December.
that social media post. We're going to see everything you ate.
I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better.
All right, I love it.
Until next Sunday.
We'll see you real soon.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah. All right.